big thing too is just these stakeholder interviews, understanding like, it was one situation where sometimes it would take like 2-3 days for outreach to happen. And that was just due to just inefficient, like in success, there were no alerts and stuff like that set up to the sales team. And if there was, it was going to the wrong person. And so there was no way to track, how quickly when something was getting created, if it was going to get worked on time or no one was even knowing about it. So like just doing everything you can to set up these system alerts. I like to take it up a notch where if I see a buying stage doesn't change within maybe 24 to 48 hours, meaning that it hasn't got worked, I send an alert to myself that lets me know, hey, I need to follow up with this. I just want to know how actively they're getting worked. Everybody will have their lanes to the stuff, but for me, it's just, I need feedback as quickly as possible.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm speaking with AJ Navarro. He's a marketing operations manager at Sprout Social, 2-time Adobe Champion, 4-time Marketo certified expert, and 6 Sense certified expert. AJ has built a remarkable reputation for transforming complex, fragmented marketing systems into high-performing revenue engines. His work has reduced lead handoff times by 99%, increased SDR meetings by 20% through unified ABM strategy, and delivered measurable efficiency gains across global organizations. What makes AJ stand out is his end-to-end understanding of operations. He has done the hands-on work where he has built journeys, nurtured them, managed data quality, optimized workflow. And he's also designed the larger frameworks that connect marketing, sales, and ops into a single alignment. His colleague described him as somebody who makes everyone around him better. And that's exactly what we can expect today. So in today's conversation, we'll explore how to design cleaner, more connected systems, how to accelerate execution without sacrificing control, and how to use AI thoughtfully. Because I know this is in everybody's mind, especially where it genuinely adds value to organizations and your operations. Stick around because AJ's playbook isn't theoretical, it's practical. He has tested measurable things that he would like to share with us, and all of them are built to help you remove friction from your GTM engine and deliver real business impact. AJ, welcome to this beautiful arrangement that we have, and thank you for doing this for us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to be here and talk all things marketing and AI.
So starting with question one, AJ, many organizations still struggle to operate from a single unified view of their pipeline. Sales look at one set of numbers, marketing another, and RevOps ends up in the middle trying to reconcile. Now, AJ, you have led a 6 Sense implementation for a national HR services provider that successfully aligns sales, marketing, and ops team. Plus, that implementation resulted in a 20% increase in SDR meetings. But do you mind walking us through how you designed that unified GTM engine? And from your experience, what are the non-negotiables for ensuring everyone truly operates from one shared system truck?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing, and I definitely think it might be the hardest thing, is in order to really drive alignment, you have to get alignment at the table, meaning that you need to bring everybody together, and that's very easier said than done. And this was only accomplished by bringing all the stakeholders to the table and having that upfront discussion of like, okay, well, what's important to the marketing team? What's important to the sales team? What's important to the RevOps team? Most importantly, what have we promised the board to accomplish, right? And just really designing or honing in on that North Star. I think that's like pivotal point number one, is you need to have an anchor. Once you have that anchor, then you need to understand how do the teams work in their day-to-day, how much bandwidth do they have, how agile are they? I always like to say, especially like within 6 Sense, what is your ideal workflow? And in this particular case, it was really getting the intent or the signals in front of them as quickly as possible, which led to our non-negotiable, which is, I believe time is the killer of all deals. And so speed to lead is just a huge thing. And so basically by aligning the goals, looking at the segments that we were going after, and mainly building alerts and making sure the intent model was fueled right by all the different signals that we wanted to go after, we were able to put those intent signals in front of the sales team in a much quicker fashion, which led to calls getting booked and demos being had. And so that's how we led to that conversion. So again, it really just comes down to one, you have to get everybody to the table. And again, that's way easier said than done, but you have to pivot on a North Star and what are you aiming towards? But two, you need to have a fundamental understanding of how these teams work, because what may be fast could be slow for another team or vice versa. And so you need to take that in. And at the end of the day, it's about getting buy-in from all these different teams, because it really is a team effort in order to get this done.
It is indeed very easier said than done, 100%. And I think the internal alignment is so critical in these implementations that it can really make or break things. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, AJ, data hygiene, it's like one of those things, as you said, North Star, right? Like having a clean data could be a North Star in a lot of organizations, right? So it's one of those universal goals that's easier to start, but difficult to sustain. And, I was going over your LinkedIn and you mentioned how at Tyler Technologies, how you implemented regular data hygiene audits, which ended up reducing the bounce rates by 22%, all while significantly improving the segmentation accuracy. What did you find most effective when it comes to making clean data on ongoing discipline? Something that becomes part of daily routine versus, quarterly cleanup exercise.
And so this is a good call out, because I think at this particular time in my career, I didn't have or I didn't know of all these fancier duplicate tools that we have now. So a lot of this was by hand, and really the best way, I think that's really the best way to start, was a lot of what I did was as part of my routine admin morning login process. I would get in and understand, okay, how many records entered the system from the past 24 hours. I'd run that report. Then I build another report and, smart list subscription or whatever have you, and understand, okay, what sources did they come from? And I was particularly looking for, are there any sources that are blank? Then I would go make another effort and export that into like a CSV file and create a pivot table and look for duplicates. Again, this is all manually by hand back in the day. But this is how strict I was on keeping the data clean in order to just fuel whatever marketing efforts that we were going to do. And then really to make my life a lot easier, just building an operational program that would take care of a lot of the standard baseline stuff of what we would consider really baseline today, which is like your data normalization and just any of those things like that, just pending state values or any of that data stuff. I was fortunate at this time we weren't using any other like list purchasing tools or anything like that, so it wasn't like a huge mess. But those small, sometimes tedious steps really set the foundation of like everything that I needed to do across all of the other marketing efforts. And so even today, I highly recommend, whether you're looking at like MQLs or anything like that, like I don't know that I could ever get away from pulling a report of, okay, how many leads entered my system over the past 24 hours? Am I missing anything from lead sources? And you can get really creative with this. You can set up a smart list subscription to send it to you when a lead source is not populated. And then you could go ahead and build like a central operationalization to just make sure that all of your person sources, your lead source details, lead source details most recent, all that jazz is filled out, just getting captured from your forms, list uploads, any of that stuff.
Got it. No, that's a great call. And you're right about buying the third party data that could make things really look messy. I want to talk a little bit about the integration pitfalls. Many operations teams spend more time fixing integrations, because there's so many things that need to integrate right for the engine to work effectively, that they spend so much time on those integrations than executing strategy. I know you work hands-on across Marketo, Salesforce, Lean Data, Six Sense, both as in-house admin as well as a consultant, from that experience, AJ, what are the most common integration pitfalls that you encounter, and how would you recommend somebody who is starting or struggling with this design a system architecture that minimizes the risk of breakdowns and sync issues over time?
A lot of this, I think you could deem as like fundamental thinking, but I think in even my work today, I don't see this too much. In fact, I see like what I'm about to preach against is it's very easy to get wrapped up in operating in a silo or just getting that shiny object syndrome where like it's integration. We got to get it up and running. We have to get it up and running. You know, but it could be like lean data, it could be 6 Sense, it could be Marketo Measure, where we're just trying to get the tool up and running. And to an extent, yes, you need to think about the tool and just getting the base or the bare bones working. But you always kind of need like a set of fresh eyes and the ability to step back and understand like, well, what does your MarTech ecosystem look like, right? Like I always, as best as I can, it doesn't always work, but most of the time it does, is I always try to understand how can I implement this tool to supplement this tool and so they play cohesively together to where like, they're not working against each other or they're not telling me two different things. And so maybe I need to build my Marketo programs better so that way when it gets over here, it looks the way I need it to. Or do I need to build my Salesforce campaigns a little bit better or vice versa? I'm always just having that lens of how does this scale? What does this look like in 1 to 2 years? Like I know you're implementing it because we have a deadline and things like that, but more often than not, when we're rushing just to get it implemented, what tends to happen is you implement it, you relax for a couple weeks, and then you're like, okay, now what? Like I have all this data from whatever tool, like now what do I do with it, right? And then you spend a lot of time trying to be creative with how to use the data. And then another maybe 6 months goes by and you get to the endpoint, you're like, oh, wait, I didn't implement this right. So the data I have like is useful, but it's not as useful as I would like to be. So I need to spend another 3 months kind of re-architecting this to get that. And it comes from just kind of like brushing through and really not stepping back holistically and understanding how can the system play well with each other. And I mean, all of that, honestly, that conversation starts at the vendor evaluation, which is why it's just so important to go in there and like really poke holes in these new tools and not get wrapped up in the shiny object syndrome, but also leverage AI. I mean, AI is there in Gemini and GPT, Claude, whatever that you want to use to understand like, hey, what are the pros and cons that I may not be seeing or I may not be thinking about if I want to scale this in 1 to 2 years. Like it's easy to get wrapped up in a sale or to implement the tool, but you've got to stay away from being siloed and just focused on the short term and just look at the broader picture of how does this play in, because your contract in all reality is going to at least be 1 to 2 years, right? And it's about just how do I prove ROI with this tool besides just standing it up?
That's a good call out. And I think a lot of times, people do get stuck with shiny object syndrome, right? So it's critical to look beyond that and ask the right questions, as you mentioned, right, to make sure that you're not falling. One other thing I want to talk about, AJ, is kind of migration, right? So a lot of times, and I've seen in this space, folks launch marketing automation or they migrate from platform A to platform B, and then they list out all the activities they need to do, right? Once it happens, once the migration is complete and the connections are live, they think like they're done, right? But both you and I know, right, the real work actually starts right after launch. Now I've read that, you have migrated Adobe's post-migration optimization playbook and how you help organizations reestablish stability in their new Marketo instances. So in your view, what should teams be like focusing on during the first 90 days post-migration to avoid dips in performance and gain momentum quickly?
I think there's a variety of ways to do this. And in the first 90 days, I think it's important to set some type of like stretch goal or like even some creative goal. And I say that because if you're migrating platforms, at least from what I see, most of the time it's because you've either outgrown your current platform or you're looking for a little bit more features in that, and those unlocks. And to your point, when most people kind of migrate, the migration is so tedious at times where like you get there, like, okay, everything's up and running. And, take Marketo Engage, for example, like you get in there, you build your programs, and you kind of keep the lights going, right? But I always try to lean back on like, well, why did we get this platform in the first place? Because we sought out to do this advanced lead scoring or these advanced nurturers, or maybe even these new webinar features, this new chat. And so I think you always need to have some type of element with any tool of creativity and innovation of how are you scaling it? Like, what does that, the maturity curve kind of look like with this tool? Because otherwise you just kind of stay stagnant. So I think people call this like a passion project or whatever have you, but there's a lot of features that you need to start looking into. And even if you test them out and they don't make business sense right away, that's fine. But as an admin of these platforms, you need to understand like what cards are in your back pocket, when and where, and what levers you can pull on should you need them. And how can you push the limitations of the tool? So in that first 90 days, I think it's critical that you pick at least one creative thing that you weren't able to do in the past platform or that you've wanted to do, that you take on and try to do. And you could do that at a very small scale, but like use the tool, dive into it head first and like get into like, why did you buy it in the first place? Like, what were you trying to do? Take those baby steps towards that. I think that's what's important, besides just keeping the lights on and starting to really just throw yourself in and invest yourself into the platform.
Got it. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I think as you go into like migration, as you go into fixing the integrations, and kind of shifting gears a bit to like campaign side, right? The campaign delays are such a universal frustration. At Shift Paradigm, I read how you have successfully managed 7 or more large-scale marketing projects simultaneously, and it led to you supporting organizations with billions in revenue, which is, obviously pretty impressive. And you did this without sacrificing any kind of accuracy or compliance. AJ, how do you structure your workflows and approvals to maintain campaign velocity while still ensuring all the data integration? You talked about the quality of the data and consistency across multiple teams.
This honestly is just a skill that I think I picked up from being a consultant that at least me personally, I believe that you could really only learn in being in the consultant where you not only are a solo practitioner, but you need to have very, very, very high PMing skills and managing multiple projects and things. And it's a skill that translates very, very well to where at any org I've been in is you're going to have a ton of different stakeholders, a ton of different teams, a lot of different moving pieces. And it really is your job to make sure all the pieces are moving at the right time without a ball getting dropped. And again, that's way easier said than done. But I think it just comes down to being thorough, asking the right questions, being clear on what is the strategy, with anything behind a campaign, a list upload. Something that I've learned and what's been taught to me is getting it clear. Why are we doing this? What is happening? Sometimes it's okay to just be a one-off, but when it's too much of a one-off, that affects my bandwidth or a team's bandwidth. To like, what is this impacting? What is the goal? And 3, again, just setting, I guess, like tight deadlines, but most importantly, being able to proactively anticipate blockers and having an A, B, C, or D option when those blockers arise. And again, you don't necessarily need to be perfect at it, but I truly believe you have to always operate with a sense of urgency. And when you do that, like you got to over communicate, embrace full accountability, full ownership. I just find that you tend to move these projects a lot quicker, but most importantly,
it's astonishing to me that some of these soft skills, are sometimes overlooked during the, selecting the agency or hiring process. And that could really make or break your entire team confidence or team operation if you're not good at, PMing or manage those deadlines and get effectively. So I think all of them that you said resonated really well. I want to shift gears a little bit into personalization now, AJ, because as somebody's launching multiple campaigns, right? Like it could really fall flat if it's not personalized to, especially in the prospecting space, because I know personalization at scale often sounds good in theory, but falls apart in execution, right? At Tyler, I know there were some dynamic email nurture campaigns that you built, and I believe you were able to increase engagement by over 20%, right? By tailoring content to each customer's journey stage. I would love to know more about that because it's such a interesting topic and done at scale, but with precision, I would love to understand like how you outlined your process for translating audience data into meaningful personalization logic and how you ensure that it translates into measurable pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was again when I was first kind of getting my footing. Really, I was just obsessed with understanding the email like performance reports. That's what we relied heavily off of, or I did at least. And we had our segments built out, and it was, for me, it was as simple as understanding, okay, well, which emails were getting the most traction, and then I would look which links were getting the most traction, and then what segments kind of were corresponding with these links, and then could I break it down by the industry or by job titles, company size. I was always just looking to dissect that information, which is why that was successful, just kind of finding what people tended to love. And Tyler, I will say, was one of the first, I forgot the exact number, but we, even walking in when I first took the job, they had a relatively high opening rate and engagement rate just in emails. It was like over 90%, which is like really, really good. But nowadays, I think there's so much more that you can do. And like what I would leverage AI for, again, make sure it's okay with your company, but one of the things that I would love to do, or that you can do, is to pump that same data into an AI model, and understand, break it down by what are they really engaging with and why. Another cool thing is, take webinars, for example. You can map the different type of questions, polls, answers, or anything that your audience is saying. Maybe map that into a string field, feed that into AI, look at the language and have it break down what trends are they talking about. Run the audience through there and say, okay, here are the trends based off of the segments. Like there's so many ways that you could extract this information out in a much quicker manner using AI. Like I'm just a big fan of that. Like you can understand the engagement rating, how long someone is staying, the attendance duration, what are they talking about. And then you can leverage, there's a ton of different articles out there on how to understand what's the best time to send an email based off of your different audiences and all of your current email metrics. And I think just the more you do that, just the more that you keep the customer kind of at the center focus in everything that you do, you're just going to see success. I think that's the tell as old as time, right? Is just keep them in the middle. Really don't worry about, don't worry about your competitors or anything like that, right? But like, yes, that is important, but what's important is what do they engage with? Feed that niche, feed that engagement. But you need to also understand, like, don't just say, yeah, it's working, we're going to keep doing it. I think you need to dissect it and start to unwrap and unlayer, like, well, why is it working? Why is this working? What am I doing right? And why didn't these other things work? Why is the audience like this? I think just having that curiosity, you're just going to learn a lot more, and know these things like the back of your hand, and you'll see success.
Yeah, curiosity is such a critical component for any analysis or any marketer, to understand, or as you said, dissect, and get the real reasoning versus, it's working, I don't know why, I'll just keep doing it and hope it continues to work. So, AJ, what's your thought on attribution. I see many marketers struggle with, proving to the CFO the real impact of marketing. It's one of the persistent challenge when it comes to revenue reporting. Like, did marketing drive it actually? But I know like you have done some amazing work in like global financial services firm where you optimize their reporting framework and help shift leadership focus from vanity metrics to genuine revenue impact. I believe you saved them over $400,000 in the process. What framework do you rely on to design the attribution model that both sales and marketing can trust? Because trust is such an important factor here. And from your perspective, what metrics should teams stop fixating on that you call vanity metrics? Because they don't truly reflect the business value.
In my opinion, when it comes to attribution, it is heavily reliant on your MarTech infrastructure, how your campaigns work in Repeat Marketo or whatever map you're using, how your campaigns work in Salesforce. The data is only going to be as clean and as structured as you are, your UTM strategy and things like that. So whenever I run into teams that they don't trust the reporting, it's because maybe the UTMs are inconsistent and stuff like that. Now, at the end of the day, it is technology. Like, I'd be lying if I said it solved everything. I like to treat attribution as a pretty strong guiding light and kind of guardrails on like what we are doing, and you can show a ton of impact. And I mean, I do this every day by using these types of tools. Now, again, in order to get what kind of metrics and stuff we need to focus on, this is again understanding, okay, well, what is the board focused on? What is sales focused on? What is RevOps focused on? What is marketing focused on? Sometimes the tools are bought for just prove marketing's impact. Again, I lean on, you need to be able to tie it to the org's performance and the other team's performance. How does my team help this team, or vice versa? How does this tool help this team? In order to be able to do that, you need to understand their processes. So like a Marketo measure, for example, that only works by having a clear understanding of not only how marketing does its job, but how sales does its job. Because if you can't map that, you're going to miss out on that. And then someone's going to feel like they're left out into the different systems. Now, as far as what metrics or things to focus on, one, you got to stay away from understanding how much credit did I get for this? How much credit did I get for driving this trade show or whatever? I think credit is a bad word, and it just builds like a rift between the teams when you need to approach this from, I like to think of it as like influence. How have we influenced these deals to move forward? I think they called this like mixed marketing modeling or something like that, where I like to look at it as just a big recipe of, in a perfect world, if deals were to really accelerate through the funnel, what is the right touches, when and where? And again, based on personalization, the different type of segments, what type of touch works well around here so we could do more of that. I think the most important metrics that you're always just going to look at is lead creation. What is driving people to enter your system for the first time? Good. MQL, I think that's an easy one. Like, what's causing them to cross that threshold and become marketing qualified? And then another one is opportunity. Well, what's driving these people to become ops? Is it your content? Is it, we're getting them to book sales calls and things like that? Like, I think those are three just can't miss metrics. And then you can start to peel back and look at, okay, well, how is events performing? How's paid advertising performing? What's moving the needle? How's emails performing? But I tend to focus on at least those three, which are like the big three. And then you can get creative and look at maybe a certain opportunity stage or different types of first touch to like think about, okay, how can we drive brand awareness? But I think you can never really go wrong on just, especially if you're first starting out, when you're building your attribution model, just keep it simple with a 30-30-30, and then maybe 10% to all of your middle touches, and just kind of get a baseline of, okay, what's causing people to enter our system? Why are they MQLing? Why are ops opening? And then from there, we can understand, okay, what's moving ops open to closed won, closed loss, and what can we do more of there? And then you can like go that extra layer. But those are the things I think you should focus on. I think keeping it simple when it comes to attribution is best. If you want to get more creative, I definitely think a data analyst will be very, very useful in like getting the perfect percentages on the attribution model and all that. But in my career, I've seen a ton of success on just keeping it simple, keeping it aligned, and understand, okay, well, what's driving the business forward? What do we care about?
Yeah, keeping it simple is so critical. And like keeping it simple actually gets you 30% way there, right? And making it sophisticated may help you get that up last 5 to 10%. But in a lot of cases, it doesn't really matter because as long as it's directional and gets you 90% there, that's good enough. I want to talk a little bit about the efficiency as a growth strategy. You have demonstrated that process design itself can become a growth lever. I'm talking about your work reducing MQL to VDR handoff time by 99%, and how it generated hundreds and thousands of dollars in operational savings. Would love to know how you identify which parts of the funnel to streamline first, because they're different parts of the funnel. How do you translate those operational gains into results that resonate with executive leadership at the board?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this goes just back to the premise of what I said earlier, like speed to lead. So for me, it's just important of the moment someone becomes an MQL, I'm handing them off to sales. Like for me personally, I need to be doing that as quickly as possible. On that same note, and again, there's a lot of give and take here, so I highly recommend you have a sit down with these teams to understand their actual day in the life and their bandwidth and stuff like that. But what's critical for me is understanding how quickly can you work this? How quickly can I get an answer on, is this quality or is it not? Because that just helps me gauge on what I need to fine tune. So for me, it's all about really focusing on, yes, providing top of funnel quality, but I also am really focused on just what does that middle funnel look like? Like if there is this truly quality MQLs, can we be doing better? Are they qualifying? Again, back to why are they qualifying? If they're not, why are they not? Like I need to understand, where did it go cold? There could be a variety of reasons. Maybe they're in a competitor contract. Maybe there's been internal org shifts, just buying time's not right. There's just a variety of reasons, and it's just, again, honing in on why, and knocking down the process. Again, a big thing too is just these stakeholder interviews, understanding like, I was in one situation where sometimes it would take like 2-3 days for outreach to happen. And that was just due to just inefficient, like in 6 Sense, there were no alerts and stuff like that set up to the sales team. And if there was, it was going to the wrong person. And so there was no way to track, how quickly when something was getting created, if it was going to get worked on time, or no one was even knowing about it. So like just doing everything you can to set up these system alerts. I like to take it up a notch where if I see a buying stage doesn't change within maybe 24 to 48 hours, meaning that hasn't got worked, I send an alert to myself that lets me know, hey, I need to follow up with this. I just want to know how actively they're getting worked. Everybody will have their lanes to this stuff, but for me, it's just, I pass these off to you. I need them worked as quickly as possible within reason, obviously. But besides them getting worked, I need feedback as quickly as possible. I think that's the number one needle mover, is getting feedback from your sales team on like, hey, is this actually worth your time? No. Do I need to go back to the drawing board and figure out, okay, perfect, because I'll go do that. But I think just getting that feedback helps you going to move that needle. And that's exactly what we did when we were working on 6 Sense, and why it was literally like an overnight, like not only was the model feeling right, but we set up all these alerts, which are pretty foundational. And the moment somebody became like a 6QA, the team knew about it. They had something to work. They went and worked it, and then meetings were booked. And it was as simple as that.
Thanks for sharing that, AJ. Now I'm going to come to the favorite topic that everybody, or the hottest topic, with AI, right? How do you make AI work for operations? AI is transforming how operation functions, but not always for the better, right? At this year, marketing operations conference, you are leading a session on how marketing operation professionals can use AI more effectively. AJ, how should leaders think about integrating AI into processes like lead scoring, campaign optimization, while maintaining sound human judgment. We all know, if AI not done right, it could go horribly wrong and can hurt you instead of helping you. What are some of the early warning signs that AI may introduce into more risk than value?
So I have a hot take on this, and this is why my session is on this. I'm a big AI fanboy, and I will say I do think that there always needs to be context and guardrails within however you're using it. But my whole thing on AI is the idea behind it or how you think about it. And that's what I hope to accomplish at MAPSA, which is in the simplest form. If I could really sum it up in one takeaway is I like to think of AI like Jarvis from Iron Man, where it's just my endless second brain or like secretary in everything I do. That doesn't always mean that's 100% accurate or right, but in such a short amount of time, the ability of what I can learn or the skills that I can acquire by having this personal assistant like almost on demand to tell me anything and everything and to cross-reference, and the output it's just 100 times an ROI. And in fact, in my session, I have an actual ROI prompt on the ROI you get from paying $20 a month from just like ChatGPT versus the problems it's helped you solve. So if you're there, highly encourage you to check out that session. When I think like in terms of this layered in MOPS is it's simple. It's just almost everything that I do now and every conversation I have, even with like a vendor, in the back of my mind, I've already known what's possible with AI. So I literally almost walk away from every vendor call with like, could I just build this myself? And sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no, or it unlocks different ideas. But I'm looking to accelerate any tasks. Not, I wouldn't say like always automate, but maybe augment is the right word. But I just believe it just makes me faster. It makes me more creative. It allows me to be more strategic because I get rid of like a lot of the simple tasks and like the small-mindedness. And, one of the things I talk about is I'll throw a campaign and say, hey, I'm mapping out this campaign. I want to map it out based off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So develop me a campaign that touches each one of those levels. I need one CTA. I need this type of guardrails. Or another thing I'll talk about is jobs to be done. Hey, I'm trying to put this proposal together. And if you were somebody, let's say, who's considering buying a new market automation platform, I want you to give me the top 10, buyer pain points that you're probably facing, the top 10 objections that you're probably going to hit me with, what would make you feel like a hero, and all these different things. And this is the old salesman in me that's thinking like this, but I could throw it into AI and get all this information. And again, it just allows me to be more strategic. And I just have like this Jarvis system that I could throw these things into and bounce ideas off of. And again, to keep it sane, all it comes back to this is asking the model why. Why are you giving me this answer? Sources, is this accurate or right? Like that's where the human element will always need to be there because you cannot just blindly take it. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's right, but you have to train it over time. You have to teach it your tone, what you're looking for, and just all these different things. But even then, I mean, just your output is, I'm a team of 6, when it's really just me. But what I can do, it's just it can't be contained. I'm just a big fan of it. Again, so I can go on this further, but another point is I literally taught myself how to use the Marketo API in a matter of weeks, where I'm doing more advanced algorithm stuff, but I have no idea how to code. I have no technical knowledge of that sort. And now I'm in this system called the Marketo API, doing thousands of batch uploads, doing list augmentation, all this stuff from the API, because I taught myself via AI. And so that's what I think is like, it just allows you to think, faster, be more creative, and just take your skills to the next level. And I think you really need to embrace it. Within its constraints, though, there's going to always be pros and cons. With AI, you have hallucinations, you have bias, drift, which is why it's important to read up on the different type of guardrails and the safety nets and what's put in place, which I talk about in my session. So I think just Just bring it into your daily workflow. It could be something as simple as, hey, Marketo released a new feature. What do you think of this? Da, 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 da. Or, hey, here's this LinkedIn article. Somebody's talking about this feature. What do you think of this? And just start changing it. I think more often than not, especially with AI, some people are just using it to say, oh, hey, write me this email. And it's past that. That's 6 years ago in my mind. And when it comes to AI, I truly like to think of it as it's the new Microsoft Office, where you don't need to put it on your resume, right? Like, it's expected that you know how to use it. And so I just think you need to fully embrace it.
I think you said it right. Like AI could be such a blessing if used with appropriate guardrails. And I think businesses who are going to embrace it are going to be ahead of the curve with anybody else. And so as a team members, right? Which brings me to my next question about the building teams, right? And then the change that AI is bringing, right? Operational roles are demand. We all know that, and often very high pressure. Your career path, right from managing 30 plus employees at enterprise, went accord to becoming a 2-time Adobe Champion and marketing operations manager at Sprout Social, demonstrates both adaptability and leadership under pressure. AJ, how do you cultivate a team culture that balances precision with agility? Right, managing 30 plus people is no joke, right? So what have you found that help people stay resilient and motivated? I mean, constant organizational and technological challenge or changes that all of us require.
With this one, I really just believe and even this one took me like a little while to learn, but I think it's necessary, is one, I think you need to take your ego out of it at the end of the day. Like, case in point, like, it doesn't matter if I'm a 2-time Adobe champion or if I'm a 6-time Adobe champion. Like, if I'm entering an org for the first time, or even at my current team, like, I like to operate like I know what I'm capable of and I'm confident and I can get the job done, but I don't try to come across as that, like, I'm the smartest one in the room. If anything, I always try to put myself in the mindset like I'm the rookie, right? Or like assume almost that I'm wrong, right? By just having this more humbling mindset. With that, you tend to build a lot of trust with any of the teams that you're going to be working with. And it's just easier to get the ball rolling and get to buy-in. But it's also easier to motivate, right? Like, I'm a big team guy. And so especially at my time in like the consultancy era, is I'm the type of person, like, if you Slack me, hey, you have an extra 5 minutes, like, I'm jumping on a call, right? And those are the type of teams that I like to be in, because it's just a team effort. Everything just runs a lot smoother when you have that, and changes are gonna happen. You have to be nimble, you have to be agile, you have to be adaptable. One of my mentors always just tells me, just focus on skill acquisition. So on top of just really putting your ego to the side, is, I think, motivating others to, like, hey, have you tried learning this, or have you done this, da da da. But also sharing the knowledge too. Like, anything I'll learn about the API or whatever, like, I'll try to just share it back. Or if I see an article that from Adobe or something on LinkedIn, just knowledge sharing as much as possible and making that feel like a safe space. And people absorb it, or they don't, like, great, that's up to them. But, like, I think just do your part on just trying to be a good teammate yourself. And I've just seen success in that. And just being clear and transparent, and you can handle a lot of things with your teams, being upfront. I think the most important thing though is, I think it's the saying, like, say what you mean, but mean what you say, or do what you say. Basically, like, if you say you're going to do something, like, get it done. My whole goal and just the way that I operate or how I work is to kind of be like that servant leader, where, like, I just put others first. Just don't have them asking you 5 times where this campaign brief is or the program is. Like, get it done quicker than what you think you could get it done, if possible, right? So that you just need to be seen as dependable, right? When you do this, you just really build that team culture. I think these are a lot of leadership qualities that you show, the soft skills that you show. It's just important, and just focus on the skill acquisition. Like, always, again, have the mindset of like a rookie or like a first dayer. Like, what can I be learning? How can I be improving? Which leads me to my last point is like, ask for feedback over and over and over. Like, focus on your blind spots. Like, doesn't matter how good you are. Like, again, it's cliche, but you can always be getting better. Take feedback, get used to it. I'm someone like monthly, I will ask for feedback. What can I be improving on? How can I get to this next level? I aspire to be like this. And that's from all my peers. It doesn't matter if someone's an associate level or an expert or whatever. Like, I put all that ego stuff to the side. Like, really embrace it as a team. And I think that's just how you build that leadership culture. And I can go on that forever. It's a big passion of mine, but just having those soft skills is how you'll stay adaptable, and how you'll build a solid team that you'll work hard for, but most importantly, they'll work hard for you.
Yeah. It's like, I think there's a saying, right? Like, have the leadership skill that your team can go to war for you, or, whatever that thing is. I know I'm not saying it right, but it's having that kind of culture and having that kind of trust in the team is kind of critical, right?
Yeah.